Welcome back to Wednesday Night Zombie Fever. You're here with Steph, Richard. Sorry about that.
We're just discussing our neighbours. We're not too sure what they do.
Yeah. We've only ever seen them a couple of times.
Yeah.
So.
The mystery of the neighbour across the hall.
Yeah. We'll bring you more on that later. So, the review. 300 Spartans.
Yeah, so as you know, last week I reviewed the film Sorry, King Kong.
Last week we reviewed the film I reviewed. Interesting.
So this continues our theme of reviewing older films you've probably never seen. And this one you've probably never heard of. Basically, it is a film about the Battle of Thermopylae. You're probably all familiar with 300. That was based on a comic book which was based on the historical account of Thermopylae. This is just a version of the actual account from Herodotus.
And if anybody has seen 300, it is really historically inaccurate.
Yeah, but a fun film.
It's done very well.
It's historically.
Like, visually.
Visually, yeah. Anyway. So I'll try to compare it to that, because I think that's what a lot of people are familiar with. Visually, this is really in the style of those 60s and 70s big-scale Hollywood productions. Think Ben-Hur and, those sorts of films. So in terms of the production of costuming, the filming of it, it's very much like those older films. And I know that, I think, Steph, you were mentioning, a scene from Ben-Hur where they filmed the guy going around the chariot thing like a lot. There's quite a few scenes like that in terms of battle scenes. They're just, really drawn out. In terms of the, the acting and as a film, it's put together very well, but the narrative doesn't quite work. They've really tried to translate history literally onto the film, not in terms of the nationality of anyone concerned, because those Persians look like the most Anglo-Saxon people I've ever seen. But overall, they've tried to kind of ramp up that historical accuracy, but whereas 300 pretty much exchanged historical accuracy for
fun stuff.
Visual.
Well, it would have been it was a battle, but those weird deformed people in the battle,
like the E4s and
the
things.
E4s were like these magical kind of but
they've really kind of exchanged accuracy for entertainment. In this one, they've gone for historical accuracy.
So it's more like a documentary than a...
Sort of more like a documentary, but I still wouldn't call it historically accurate, but it's just trying to be historically correct to the point where there isn't really much of an engaging storyline. And for people who are familiar with the battle, there's still those inaccuracies there. It really follows that same strain as 300,
so
as in
just
the few against the many. Yeah, and it really follows that. But the acting can be very wooden at times. It is that style of acting where they've obviously translated it from stage to film. I don't know if people are familiar with a lot of those early films where it's just taking that acting that you would do for stage and just putting it in front of a camera, and it doesn't really work.
Really over the top, because that stage actually you need
they're trying to
big
project
gestures
it
and really clear facial...
they need to project it.
Because you need people to be able to see it in the back. So
it's not really geared to film as well. There's also a lot of characters that perhaps aren't contributing as much, that I think in a modern version of this film, obviously, as I said, 300 was a version of a comic book. If you were going to do a version of the battle itself based on Herodotus, you definitely have to streamline it, and they haven't really done that. It's a very long film.
How long?
Ben-Hur long?
It's not Ben-Hur long, but it is it's longer than 300, obviously. It's, I think it's a couple of hours or so. But the story, there are parts that are drawn out, and it doesn't work as well as 300, I think, as a film. If you are familiar with films of that period, those kind of epic scale films like Ben-Hur and similar ones, it's that sort of a film. Overall, I'd probably give it maybe... I think overall it was kind of done well, but there were just a few little moments. So I would give it...
Rachel's really struggling here.
Yeah.
I'm
in suspense.
Yeah. What would she give it?
I'm thinking she's going to give it a 6.
Well, I was tossing up between 6 and 7. I think I'm going to give it a 7. because I think people should check it out just as an example of film of that period and of sort of the vision of 300 in that period. I know that there's been a lot of both criticism and commentary on 300 that it's sort of a version of modern Western relations with the East, particularly American relations with Iran, because the Persian Empire is what eventually became Iran. So there's been a lot of comparisons drawn between those two bodies in the modern age and 300 as a vision of that. And this was made during the Cold War. And people have sort of drawn similarities between how these two groups are represented in the film and then kind of contemporary Cold War politics as well.
It's always brought back to America.
Yeah, it's always brought back to some sort of political thing. Yeah. And that's kind of what that image of Thermopylae is. It's that kind of Western world's the few against the many sort of...
Yeah.
And I mean, the rhetoric of everything in
I'm surprised
Herodotus
that they
is
haven't
that.
actually done a movie that is based on that story, because it is quite a good story. Even though it's not told... Like, 300, it's very different to what actually happened. But I think you can make a very good movie based on the actual story of Thermopylae.
Yeah. And I think that what annoyed me most, because, I mean, you were talking about historical inaccuracies in 300. What annoyed me most about this one is when they were going into battle and they had their, like, battle lines, and they were a solid 10 metres apart in this film. Okay. That's not how you fight.
No.
So they had, like, you know, that phalanx formation. But all of each of the lines were, like, 10 metres after each other.
Yeah. See,
what was that?
The Greeks knew not to do that. The Romans knew not to do that. I mean, everybody
Yeah.
knew.
So, I mean, that's obviously a really picky thing when you're thinking about historical inaccuracies, but it's something that you notice in watching it.
See, I was watching an old film the other day, and I can't remember what it was. I don't think I ever got the name of it, but with those old films, they don't really... I don't know if it's that they don't try for it or they don't actually know how to do historical accuracy, or it's just they look over things that we wouldn't pick up today, because I noticed that the glass in the windows was really perfect. And back in the times when this movie was set, not when it was filmed, but when it was set, they wouldn't have been able to have the glass that was that perfect. I just that's something I picked up on. But
Well, yeah, I mean, also in this film, they had very, like, they had the Spartan shields, but they had very Roman armour and, like, Roman dress, particularly when they're actually in Sparta, but also in that.
That kind of stuff I understand, because you can't really have the traditional Spartan battle attire.
It's true.
Isn't that nothing?
Nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, don't they have that on that new show?
Which one?
Rome? Is it Rome? Were they all just naked?
Oh, they're not naked all the time in Rome, but there is a lot of nudity in that film.
Okay.
In that series.
All I know is that my nan watches it. I haven't actually watched it.
Oh, wow.
Oh, no, there is a lot of nudity and stuff in Rome, but Romans weren't naked when they went into battle.
I'm not talking about that. I'm just like...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think one of the most annoying... I think the historical inaccuracies in this film annoyed me more than the historical inaccuracies in 300.
Well, because
And I
the
think
300
it's-
wasn't meant to be circular.
Yeah, it's because it is kind of this grand scale comic style adaptation that you kind of forgive a lot of that, particularly in the representation of characters, like the representation of Xerxes, which a lot of people have sort of criticised as like racist and things. But because it's a comic book style adaptation, it's just a character. You don't look at it as a historical figure.
Yeah.
It's just entertainment. Yeah.
Whereas in this one, it's really presenting itself as an historical account. So the inaccuracies, particularly with, I mean, ethnicity, as I mentioned, but also in the recreation of the battle,
I think
you can be more critical of them.
They're going to be held more liable when they really try to do it historically accurate. Whereas 300, I didn't really care.
Yeah.
Because you know that that's very much, you know, an
That's a graphic
adaptation.
novel. Yeah.
All right, cool.
Cool. Well, we'll be back with...
We'll be talking about when have you done something shifty to get free food.
Yeah, so let us know on Facebook if you've ever done something, whether it's go to an event that you weren't really into or something, just to get free food.
Lied to get an extra free sample, you know. Oh, it's for my grandmother, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I might buy that. No.
If I could just taste one more, I might actually buy a packet.
Yeah.
And let us know if you've seen the 300 Spartans or if there's any films that you would like us to review. Right now, this is Imagine Dragons on 2BACR 100.9 FM.